Kim Criswell, as I live and breathe. Do you know, Kim, it's been exactly 3 years, believe it or not, since you launched my live series of comparing notes at Pizza Express Holborn with a bang. I don't think the aircon's ever been quite the same since, actually, but that's my girl.
Well, I did have a microphone.
I hate to think how long it's been since we were first introduced by the late lamented John McGlinn. It must, oh gosh.
Well, it was late 80s when I was doing those recordings.
Yeah.
And I think probably I met you pretty early on. Did I meet you on the Anything Goes recording? I think I did.
I think around that time, because I was still writing for The Independent then, we met for an interview of some sort. Maybe it was The Independent, maybe it was Gramophone.
I think it was Gramophone, actually.
Okay.
Although, who knows? I don't remember. But I believe it was either 1987 or 1988.
Yeah. I mean, John, we should say a few words about John. Extraordinary encyclopedic knowledge, a great archivist. And I suppose the sadness about John was that he wanted to be a great conductor. And he wasn't, and that was the dark star that followed him around. Is that the impression you got?
Yes, he certainly was very aspirational in terms of becoming a conductor, and he realized, I mean, he didn't admit it often, but he would to close friends like me and probably you as well, that he knew he needed technically to be better than he was. And he actually went back and did a conducting degree after all of this success hit.
Wow.
So he continued to study so he'd get better. And I think he did get better.
Yeah.
But, he was never going to be Bernard Haitink or Simon Rattle or anybody like that. He just didn't really quite have that. What he did have was arguably just as important and much more rare, actually. He had that sort of brain that makes you sit down and get 27 little bits of paper and turn them into one document that makes sense musically. There are an awful lot of people who can conduct, but there aren't an awful lot of people who were willing to put in the work and the sweat equity that he did on reconstructing all of those scores, because you have to really love it to do it.
Is it true that a lot of that archival property he had has been lost? I heard a rumor somewhere that it was, a bit like the famous MGM story of them building a car park over the archives.
Well, yes. I mean, those of us who were close to him and worked with him, and, of course, he died quite suddenly, and we were all shocked. And so everything was in disarray. I don't think it's true that things were lost. However, there was a big segment of it that was lost, which is because everything that he did, he would put all these things into a program called Finale, which is, a music copying, transcribing program. So he used Finale, and he had Finale files on everything that he had ever done. And those were on various hard drives. The hard drives are what went missing. I think they got.
I knew there was something I'd heard.
Yeah, I think they ended up being thrown away.
Goodness.
Because they were on a Mac system that nobody could quite access, and basically that was a screw up. However, there were paper copies of everything. So the Library of Congress does have his body of work.
Oh, good.
So these things do exist, although they're not as accessible as he wanted them to be, which is one of my, pet peeves about this whole thing. His whole point was to bring this stuff back out and let it live and let it be in rotation and be rentable and doable. And it's different shows are in a different kind of shape, but certainly you can get anything you want. The Library of Congress is there, and they're keeping an archive that's very full. We didn't realize that the hard drives had been thrown away. There was at one point, I was very involved in all of this. There was, at one point, there was an office that was set up by the man who ended up being his executor. And he was closing down the office, and everything was sent to the Library of Congress. And at some point, I realized that all the things at the Library of Congress were still sitting on a pallet somewhere. They hadn't been checked. And I said, well, if it's a computer hard drive, you need to not just let that sit around on a pallet somewhere. You need to, because those things might just go off. Computer things don't last forever.
Yeah.
So they went through the entire palette of stuff. I mean, this is all me pushing this to look for those hard drives, and they weren't there. And then we basically came to the conclusion that when the office was closed up, Larry Moore didn't happen to be there at that point. And so basically the man who was running it wasn't present either. And he just said, anything that's still left in that office, we've taken everything that's important, throw the rest of it out.
Oh, God.
That's where we think it went.
And I mean, he fought all his life for the preservation of stuff that was considered to be transitory, I mean, musical theatre was so badly treated over the years, and what John didn't know about it wasn't worth knowing. I mean, he gave the biggest build-up I've ever heard of an artist to you when we did meet, and he said, "You've got to hear this girl." He said, she's amazing. I mean, how did you two connect?
Oh, that's a funny story. I was in 9 on Broadway, and at that time I was very friendly with Jonathan Tunick. We'd been out on a couple of dates, the orchestrator of 9.
Oh, yeah.
We'd been out on a couple of dates. We were good friends. We were never like a great romance or anything, but we were and still are good friends. And anyway, somehow or other, Jonathan Tunick was put in touch with John McGlinn because there was a proposed recording version of Evening Primrose, the Sondheim piece.
Yeah.
And John said, well, I have I have the perfect singer for it. So it was all arranged. Well, no, actually, Jonathan Tunick said, well, get Kim Criswell. And so I met up with John McGlinn. And John McGlinn and I sang through everything, and he went, well, you're fantastic. Let's take this to Stephen. So we had a private meeting with Mr. Sondheim, where just in his office, where he came in and flopped down on the couch, like literally lying down, said, okay, sing it. So I sang, I remember sky, and all that stuff. And, there wasn't that much to that score. It was it was in my soprano voice, which was hilarious, because John thought I was a soprano at that point.
Yeah.
And so, we did that for Sondheim, and at the end of it, he went, well, obviously, Jonathan didn't exaggerate. You're a terrific singer. You're wonderful, but I can't really cast this based on hearing one person. So I'm going to have to, have a little bit of an audition situation. And so basically, we kind of went, I guess that went okay. Anyway, the project never happened. He and John McGlinn had a falling out, and it ended up being down to me and Daisy Prince, who is Hal Prince's daughter.
Yes.
And I thought, I don't think that's going to go my way somehow. Something tells me that's not going to go my way. And then the project fell apart and never happened. So, But that is how I met John McGlinn.
I was going to say that anybody who's heard you sing "I Got Rhythm" would never believe that you are a legit soprano. In fact, I've always thought you did a mean Julie Andrews, Kim. I mean,
I do.
Julie Andrews is just on the money.
She's the first. She shaped me. She doesn't know it. I mean, we've never met, sadly, but she shaped me. I was 4 or 5 years old, and I was singing along to, basically, how old was I when I don't know, 6 or 7 when Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music came out, and I wore out both of those records singing with her.
Oh.
And guess what? I picked up a British accent, which was quite odd in a Tennessee girl. It's quite odd. So that's why, to this day, I can really do a spot-on impersonation, because she was the first singer to imprint on my brain, and I copied everything she did, which was not a bad way to go, because her diction is impeccable. Her pitch is impeccable. She was a great singer to listen to. It's
interesting. I had some contact with her in her later years, just before the time when the disaster happened with The Voice. And I wrote the liner notes for her Richard Rodgers album. And we met and did some video interviews around that time. And of course, there were parts of her voice then, because it had dropped, it had lowered, that she'd never been able to use before, or didn't use before. A little bit in My Fair Lady, a little bit of the belt in My Fair Lady, but mainly this stuff. And it was so fascinating to hear this whole all these new colours open up to her. She was clearly very excited about it, which is why the tragedy, when it came, was all the more lamentable.
Yeah,
I mean,
that
really.
That one was terrible, and I think that was a combination. It's a cautionary tale for anybody who is wanting to go into the musical theater world and is studying and thinking, oh, this is easy, anybody can do it. Actually, 8 shows a week is a discipline that must be worked up to, must be maintained, because your voice doesn't naturally want to sing 8 shows a week. So you've got to really look after it like it's another person in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that the pressure of having been so far away, for so long, having been away from Broadway, and not singing regularly, not singing 8 shows a week, she got flung into this show where she was the name. In fact, she was the saving grace. People went to see Victoria because of her, because, by all accounts, I didn't see it. But by all accounts,
did.
The production wasn't
it was
so fabulous.
Pretty terrible. Yeah.
So it was about seeing her.
Yeah.
And so there was huge pressure on her to never miss a show, because everybody knew damn well that they were paying to see her, much more than the show. So her husband's, the producer, or the director and producer, I think. Yeah. And, her friend is the composer. And, it's just like the pressure is all on this one person who's been away from the stage for quite a long time. In the meantime, she's gotten older. If you don't use your singing voice, quite carefully and consistently, it will atrophy a bit. So it's not like you can't get back to it. You can, but you've got to work your way back a certain way. I have a feeling that she was just thrown in at the deep end of the pool.
Well, I think part of it was that she was so devoted to Blake that she didn't want to let him down. And I know for a fact
Or
that,
Henry Mancini.
Yes, and of course, what Victor Victoria, the stage version, could have been had Henry Mancini lived, would have been a very different beast, because he was writing a lot more new music for it. Mm-hmm. But, of course, the pressure of Blake saying to her, even after Broadway, I want you to do the tour. I mean, imagine that. And that was the real crunch time. I remember meeting her again when she was recording Victor Victoria. I mean, can you imagine her one day off? They're in a studio in New York recording the damn thing. And she was shattered. But such was her professionalism that I was there to write a piece that she gave me my 10 minutes in the break. And the thing I remember most about her after all this time is her saying to her assistant, darling, could you get me a cup of tea and a banana, please? That's my enduring memory of this woman who was on her knees with exhaustion. But it's a great tragedy, because tremendous talent, no question about it. Now, one of the things, the thing I've always loved about you, Kim, was your authenticity. And as John Wilson has always said, there's no one around who still preserve the old Broadway sound in the way you do. How much of that is an understanding of the vernacular just comes from the text and the style of those shows of that period?
Well, it is incredibly important to have listened to the way they used to do these things. You can't just go, oh, it's anything goes, I know how that goes. You need to listen to people sing it. You need to listen to the original recording. You need to listen to other people sing it. You need to sort of sit and analyze, okay, well, Frank Sinatra sang that song from Anything Goes too, but what did he do to it? Well, he did his own stylization on it, which is not authentic to the show itself or the time frame it was in, because, of course, he came along a bit later than Anything Goes. So once you can compare these things, you have to actually plug your brain in and analyze how much of that is, an individual singer's choices and quirks, and how much of it is the authentic style of the day. And you can get a pretty good overview if you listen to more than one person from that, from the same era doing the same role. Yeah. You get a pretty good idea. So it's about putting in that kind of time. And to be honest, when I met John McGlinn, I was a very well-trained musical theater graduate of CCM, Cincinnati Conservatory, which had a great musical theater program. But was I a specialist in those older golden era shows? No, not at all. I was poppy, and I was like everybody else that came along in the 80s. Mm-hmm. I was a poppy singer. I was kind of like that. I had fought my corner all the way through college, because there was pressure on me pretty early on to decide, it's like, no, you can either be a belter or you can be a soprano. You can't be both. Yeah. And I said, watch me.
Yes. Yes.
I said, you can't tell me I can't sing the whole range that I'm capable of. I'm going to sing all of it.
Yeah.
And honestly, that is the saving grace of me. That's why I'm blasted the way that I have, and
Yeah.
that my voice is still healthy. I haven't been banging out the same note, the
Yes.
same belt note, 4,000 times a concert. I sing all the way up and down, and it keeps me healthy. It very much was a case of adapting to what John McGlinn wanted when we started to do those recordings. Because up to that, I was in Nine, I was in Baby, I was in Broadway shows that were sort of poppy, modern-y, whatever. But I also, I had enough of the classical training behind me to know how to mix it all in if I needed to. And with John McGlinn, he was quite strict with all of his singers.
What do you say to, because there's a prevalence among drama students today, it's not across the board, but there is a prevalence for people to come out of drama school with pop voices, and all the stuff you're talking about kind of goes by the by and doesn't really, not much importance is attached to it. And what do you say to these kids? Because I know you do a bit of work with youngsters. What do you say to them about vocal health, about mix, about the mask, all those things that enable singers like you to sing many years?
Well, there are many different ways of talking about that sing in the mask thing.
Yeah.
Which, I find a lot of opera singers don't sing in the mask. They sing so far back in their throat that I don't like the sound.
Okay.
I like bright sounding voices, which to me sounds more natural and certainly feels natural to me. When I'm working with kids, I get them to, the main thing I do is I go, okay, banish the straight tone. Because straight tone is a cheat. It's a modern stylization. It's fine, but you can't sing a 40s musical all in straight tone or you'll sound like a fake, like you haven't done your homework.
Define straight tone.
Straight tone is the difference between going, I get a kick out of you, straight. You.
Yeah. So not using much or if any vibrato. Yeah.
Yeah, straight tone is no vibrato.
Yeah.
And honestly, because if you sing a note in straight tone, you don't need as big a breath. It's a way of cheating.
Yeah.
You don't need as big a breath. It takes more breath to sing a note that is vibrato laden than it does to do a straight tone note. Also, obviously, you don't want to sing an up to the minute hip hop pop tune in a operatic vibrato-y style. You've got to pick your song for your style. But those older shows, it was a lot closer to an operatic kind of production than it was to anything that we consider modern musical theater in terms of the way they sang. So straight tone's the first thing I get them on. And then they realize that they can't even sing a scale without running out of breath. It's like, well, yeah, you put vibrato in, guess what? Takes more room, or takes more breath, meaning you've got to take a bigger breath. You've got to learn how to breathe properly. You've got to learn where to store that breath so it'll get you all the way to the end of the note. And honestly, if you work that way, and college age is about the right time to get serious about it. If you work that, you change your physical shape. If you actually are breathing using all of your lungs, the lower back bit of your lungs is the part that you often don't use. So when I teach people to take a breath, I tell them, be the Incredible Hulk. None of this, your shoulders and your head are popping up. None of that. You should breathe sideways. You should fill up the bottom half of your back. And, if you do it right, it will almost push your arms out on the side because you'll be expanding your whole chest.
Yeah. That's a
but
great
not
image.
from the front. And and when you you can grab a breath very quickly that way, and you can hold a 16-bar note that way.
Yeah.
You have to think, you have to actually know where those notes are coming and go, got to get one of those great big breaths for this one. But once you get in that habit, you actually change your rib cage. Your rib cage will expand slightly, which is why you see so many opera singers who have really big rib cages. that's years of breathing differently.
Fascinating. You've said to me one day when we were chatting, you said, "Oh, I was a regular Eve Harrington when I was younger." I love that remark.
Well, I sort of was. I mean, who isn't if they're ambitious? But yeah, I look back at some of that and I roll my eyes and go, okay, that was a little bit. It was a little bit too aggressive, probably.
I mean,
Perhaps.
You mentioned Nine a while ago, which was a very, very important show, Maury Yeston's Nine on Broadway. I still think it's one of the most important shows of the last 30 years, 40 years. And
Not 30, 40.
40, yeah.
It was 82, honey.
That was a slip.
Pretty close to 40 years.
Giving my age away.
And mine. Thanks.
Yeah, it was full of innovation right from the start. That extraordinary vocal ease that constituted the overture, for example. You were Francesca in it, and then you replace Claudia. Was it a happy time or not? Because it was. Were you aware of how important the show was, and how was it being a part of it?
Well, you never know when you're in something that is going to be groundbreaking. You don't know. You just kind of go to work and go, this is interesting. And honestly, I mean, anybody who has the impression that these things, emerge full blown of whoever's in charge, no, they don't. They're very collaborative. People try one thing that doesn't work. I mean, I can't tell you how many times there'd be things like Tommy'd go, "Oh, how many steps should this be?" And I'd go, 8 and then 9, down on 9. He'd go, "Oh, yeah, do that." It's like everybody was, trying to figure out the answers to these little questions. And, by the end of it, I mean, obviously we weren't consulted on the big questions like, oh, we're going to have it all be set in a spa and it's a unit set and, it's all women instead. Because originally when the show was written, Maury had written it for a mix of men and women. It was Toon's concept that it was going to be all women.
Really?
Except for Guido. And, being in the original workshop was really eye-opening because we started with kind of no script. I mean, they knew how the story went because of the film, but the film is pretty vague. I mean, there's a lot of leeway to do things with it. And Maury had written a score, so he knew what he wanted with that. I don't remember anything new being written, anything major new being written during the process of working on it. He obviously had written it and overwritten it and written it twice enough so that if he needed a bit of music for something that wasn't there, he already had it. It was somewhere in a trunk. But he could fish out any number of songs and plop them in. But in general, the workshop version of it was pretty close to what we ended up doing on Broadway. I mean, it didn't change radically between those two things. It was meant to go straight from the workshop to Broadway, but then the funding fell out. I think it was Paramount was funding it at that point, and they fell out of it. And so we had to dig around and find another backer, which turned out to be Universal. So I think that's how that worked. Anyway, so we had like a 3 or 4 month gap before we got back in to do it. But it was not meant to be radically changed to go to Broadway. Obviously, the big change was to bring in, William Ivey Long to design those amazing clothes. And he went out on every limb you can go out on to do that. I mean, that's why he really earned that Tony. I don't think he earned a dime off of it because I think he put all of his money right back into the show.
Really?
I think he personally paid for a lot of those bugle beads on those dresses. And so many costumes were cut because Toon would look up there and go, "Oh, none of them can walk in that. Just have one of them up there." Toon had decided that I could walk, so there was one section of the Grand Canal where there were 4 little incredibly ornate gondolieri, with little panniers on the side dresses, and I was the only one that ended up getting to wear it because he cut the other 3 because he didn't like how they looked walking in it. It was.
I wish
quite interesting.
I wish I'd seen that original production. I really do.
It was really astonishing. You can see it.
Oh, it's still on YouTube?
No, it's not on YouTube, but it is at Lincoln Center.
Okay.
It was filmed for the Lincoln Center Library, so people can go and see it. It was sadly after I left, So they did it, I think, like maybe within a month of me leaving. In a way, I almost think that part of the reason they delayed it is because they knew I was leaving. Because the producer and I did not get along.
Right.
And, I left very acrimoniously right after I had taken over the role of Claudia. So this goes back to your original question of, was it a happy place? I can't say that it was. It was not a happy place. There was way too much estrogen in the room. And there was too much of a, too much of a nudge from management for us to all fight over everything. They wanted us to compete.
I see.
The show was about competing for Guido's attention.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they set up one of those slightly toxic things where everybody was quite competitive. I mean, my Eve Harrington-ness actually worked out very well because I didn't just cover Claudia, I covered Carla. So, the first time I got thrown on for Anita Morris's role, I didn't have a costume. I had not really had much proper rehearsal, if any. I had just been sitting on my box right behind her, turning around and looking over my shoulder every time she did her number so that I knew it.
Yeah.
That's, what Eve Harrington does.
Yeah.
She doesn't wait for somebody to teach it to her. She just gets on with it, which is a damn good thing I did because I got thrown on before I was officially ready. And literally, I remember William Ivy Long and I going to some of those charming shops that used to be in that 42nd Street area where they would just sell, hooker tat. The kind of clothes that hookers wore. We went to one of those to get me a costume for Carla.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, I just love it. I love, speaking of cattiness, because as we were implying then, more than implying, in the 80s you missed out to Betty Buckley to originate Grisabella in New York in Cats.
And I was in 9 at the time too.
And you were still in 9. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Did you sing for Andrew at that time?
Oh yes.
Yes.
I had a long, interesting set of auditions for that too because I had heard about the show. I already knew the song.
Yeah.
And when I went in to audition for it, I came up with the most brilliant audition anybody's ever thought of. I went in and sang this song called, because of course I had my eyes squarely set. I was only like 23, but I had my eyes squarely set on Grisabella. Yeah. And went in and sang a song called Paris is a Lonely Town. Do you know this song?
No, I don't.
It's a Harold Arlen song. It is from a cartoon film called Gay Purr-E, which is about a bunch of cartoon cats, and it was voiced by Judy Garland.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
So it was Judy Garland's big number, and I thought, this is the most genius song that I could ever possibly sing. Went in and sang that, went straight over all of their head. They didn't know what that song was.
And you didn't tell them?
No, I didn't. I was trying to behave myself. So I didn't say, you're all being dumb that you don't know that I've just thought of the best song ever to audition for Cats.
Gay Purr-E.
Gay Purr-E, yes. It's one that's never shown. I really wish that they would dig that one up because I've never seen it, but I knew the song. Yeah. Anyway, I went in and auditioned for that, and I went through like 4 or 5 more auditions. Yeah. And I was down to the wire for the role of the Gumby Cat. Okay. Which I didn't think was right for me. I knew that because the guy, he's one of Broadway's great stage managers, Peter Lawrence. He was a friend because I had just done a show with him, and he called me and said, "Well, Kimmy, you're kind of first choice for this." Mm. And then I had another audition, and I went into that one and I said, "Listen," and they were all there, Andrew and Jillian and Trevor and Cameron, and they were all there. Yeah. It was the finals. Yeah. And I went in and I said, "Listen, I know you think I'm right for the Gumby Cat." And, I'd been through this ridiculous final where we all, there were 6 of us and we all, had to do the routine and, all that, which was not a problem for me because I studied tap and I was pretty advanced tapper, actually.
And was Betty there in the finals? Was she?
I don't remember ever seeing Betty. Right. That doesn't mean she wasn't there. Yeah. But no, I wasn't aware of who was up for it. I didn't think I was up for it, really, to be honest. But I just kept getting called back. So I went in at that last, I wasn't called in with the Grisabellas. I was called in with the Gumby Cats. Yeah. So I didn't really see who was up for Grisabella. No, I went in and I said, look, guys, I know you think I'm right for the Gumby Cat, but honestly, that's not really what I do. I said, I can do that, I guess, but you probably can find somebody who is more right for that. What I do is sing memory.
Yeah,
Can
absolutely.
I sing it for you?
Absolutely.
And they said, yeah, okay, sing it for us. And I sang it for them, and they were like, oh.
Pin them to the back of the room.
So they, I managed to change their mind just by saying, listen, let me sing the song. I said, you're going to need an understudy. I know you probably think I'm too young for it, but can I sing it for you? And they let me. And then after that, I didn't get either role, but I did get a letter from Trevor Nunn. I did get a handwritten letter that was delivered to my door.
Wow.
That was, I don't think he wrote a lot of those.
No.
That basically said you fell in between. You weren't quite enough this or quite enough that, but I hope we work together, and you did a great audition. You didn't do anything wrong. Blah blah blah. I mean, it was a very uplifting, supportive letter, just to kind of explain why I didn't get cast in the show.
Yeah, you probably were too young, Kim, at that point.
Well, yes and no, because you know what? When I did it in LA, I was 2 years older.
Okay.
So I wasn't that much too young.
Yeah.
2 years. I mean, basically, what I didn't realize is in the meantime, I'd done some other shows. I went and I was in Baby, and during Baby, 1 year into Betty's, reign as Grisabella, there was talk of, it came around to contract renewal time. And Tyler Gatchell, who was the general managers were Gatchell and Neufeld, and Tyler was kind of a pal. And he got in touch with my agent and said, we're considering not renewing Betty's contract. Because Betty had missed a lot of shows, had been consistently late. She was not on great behavior.
I've got a Betty story in a minute.
Oh,
yeah. We've all got them.
She was not on great behavior in Cats, and see, I knew even more about it because a good friend of mine was her understudy, so I really heard inside stories of what was going on. So anyway, they considered not renewing her, and so they were talking to me about going in to replace her. So it was only a year later.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't think I was too young, because, honey, under all that cat fur.
Yeah, I know.
I can tell how old you are.
And it's more important to deliver the number, to nail the number.
And it's more than just singing it, although you've got to be able to sing it, and sing it on your good days and on your bad days.
Yeah.
You've got to sing it every day of your life. But you also have to be able to get to the emotional core of it. Because there's not a lot in that show that is linear enough for you to get invested in the characters emotionally. She's the one that's there for that purpose. And if you get somebody who just bats it out of the park and nails the song but doesn't bring the other side of it, that's why you would assume it needs to be someone older. But if you're the right person and you actually can tap into that well of whatever that is, then you can pull it off, and nobody can tell how old you are in the costume. Absolutely.
Yeah. Betty, of course, is another of those Broadway names that has a very authentic sounding voice and a very distinctive voice as well. And I saw her in London when she came to do Promises here when I was a young teenager, and it's very funny when she did Divas at the Donmar, which was pretty disastrous. It was just after she'd done Sunset in London, and I was still writing for The Independent then. I reviewed it, and it was such a bizarre evening that I had a whale of a time with the review. I really did. She started with a Sondheim song. She came onto the stage with her trio or quartet, got all the lyrics wrong. That was the start of the show. The two numbers from Sunset were terrible. Terrible. And Michael Grandage, years later, said to me, when I was introduced to him, he said, "Oh my goodness, you're the guy who wrote that review of Divas at the Donmar." He said, "That is one of the funniest things I've ever read." He said, I was there. He said, "I was there during that thing." During the show, she said, of course, Stephen Schwartz wrote Meadowlark for me, she said. At that time...
Patti LuPone might have an opinion about that.
At that time, I had done an interview with Patty for The Independent, and we were in contact. And I mentioned that I'd seen the show, and I said, "Is it true that he wrote it for Betty Buckley?" And she said, "What?" I'm going to ring Stephen now. She said, "I'm ringing Stephen now." I thought, "Oh, it's Handbags at Dawn," but hilarious.
There's probably a reason why those two aren't best friends. Yeah. I mean, I don't know for sure that they're not best friends, but I'd be willing to bet every dime I have that they're not.
It's a wonderful story, that Divas at Dawn. Now, one collector's item from your time in New York, Kim, was the John Dexter revival of Threepenny Opera. With Sting as Macheath and Georgia Brown as Mrs. Peachum, and you as Lucy Lockett. Butter wouldn't melt.
Oh no, mine was quite abrasive. My Lucy wasn't that charming. She was quite bolshy.
I know that you fly the flag for Kurt Weill, and now there's a composer that really needs a revival of interest. The catalogue, particularly for me, the American shows, and I know John McGlinn was a great advocate for them as well. But I mean, first of all, how was Threepenny Opera with John Dexter? Sting was the equity dep, I believe. You told me. That's hilarious in itself.
We were having, because the principals, there's always an equity dep for the principals and one for the chorus, and the principals got together and were like, who should be the equity deputy? And I can't remember whose idea it was. It might have been mine. I can't remember. I said, what about Sting? Yeah, they'll never get mad. They can't get mad at him and fire him for sticking up for things. They can't. So he's like, yeah, what is it? What is it? I'll do it. What is it?
Wonderful.
And I got him a T-shirt for opening night that said, Equity Deputy, Threepenny Opera on the front, and kick me in little letters on the back.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is wonderful.
No, honestly, that was, I wouldn't have traded with anybody. Yes, the show wasn't as successful as they had hoped, but part of the reason for that was that, because the show was not a bad show. It was not, it's not a bad show anyway, but I think there were some miscalculations made about who the audience was. Because when you do something in a gazillion-dollar way, and you put it on Broadway and you throw a ton of money at it, and the message of the show is, rich people suck, and poor people should be running the world. And because that's kind of, all of those shows have more or less that undercurrent. And, you're doing that to somebody who sat down and who paid $150 for their ticket and is sitting there wearing their best jewelry. It's when you combine that with Sting fans who'd never been in a theater before, it made for it just was an odd place to do it.
Real irony, though, in a way.
Yeah, I think it would have been a completely different show. Well, the show could have been exactly the same, but if Sting was not a famous person, but was just who he is, and we had done it in some grubby off-Broadway kind of way, like it was originally presented in America, it would have been the talk of the town and a huge hit, and all the reviews would have been, hugely positive, because they clobbered him unjustly. He actually was quite good in the show. He was very good. None of us were expecting him to be, able to act a role, but oh my God, he was great fun to be on stage with.
Super talent,
and he inhabited that character, and was a fantastic mensch of a company member. He was just great.
It's good to know.
He wanted to do everything the way we did it. It's like, well, we're doing it without mics. Okay, well, I can do it without a mic. Well, I'm doing what you're doing. I'm doing what you're doing. I'm living where you're living. Well, not so much that, but because it was quite wonderful to get to go out of town. We went to Washington D.C. to try it out, and we were all just out of town together. And that is the best possible thing to get to do when you're starting something new, because your family becomes your show. The people in your show, and that's when you're going to really get relationships going with other people.
How was Georgia?
Georgia, oh Lord, I loved her so much.
Wow.
From the beginning, Georgia, me, Maureen McGovern, and Suzanne Douglas, the four of us were the four main principal women. We became this scary quartet that went everywhere together and did everything together. I mean, we took the train down together. We brought our champagne and our sandwiches, and we did everything together. We had our meals together. We were a little claque, which some of the like director Vinnie Liff going, okay, that's just scaring me. The four of you together getting along, but we got along great. But Georgia, she had a tendency to have to find a way of shooting herself in the foot. And because she always had to have some fight going with somebody. So she would be absolutely vile to whoever she was mad at. She went through a couple of people during the first few weeks for reasons that none of us really knew why she'd gone off so-and-so, but she had. And then she turned it on me. Oh. Now, granted, I was playing her old role. She was Lucy. Yeah. And at one point, she was giving me notes. I was trying to do a quick change. I mean, during a show, I was trying to do a quick change backstage, and she came into the quick change room and went, "No, you have to stand somewhere else. You have to go," and she just started yelling at me. And I went, "Georgia, not now." And from then on, she didn't speak to me.
Where does that come from? Because, she was idolized, obviously, as Nancy. And as a boy, I so wanted to be in that show, Oliver, and or indeed auditioned for it when I was a schoolboy. But I saw it 6 times in the West End, and just that presence of her on stage. But there was an edge to her, certainly as a performer. There was an edge to her.
Yeah, she had an angry undercurrent that came from pain that she earned. I'm sure that she had plenty of pain that gave her that streak. Yeah, that was legitimate, but it did come out. Yeah, there was a bitter streak that if things were going too well, she would do something to mess it up. Yeah. I remember watching her, and when we were all getting to know each other, and I remember just going, I'd look at her and go, she's me in 30 years. But if I take a certain turn, she's me in 30 years. And I don't want to copy everything about her.
What was it that was the catalyst, really, Kim, for you deciding to leave New York and come to... We love having you here, and we've had some wonderful times with you here, but what was the catalyst? Why did you make that decision?
Well, honestly, it was the opportunities that were coming up over here. Right. Because of John McGlinn, who I will be grateful to for the rest of my days. Yeah. He insisted that EMI ask me to do his Anything Goes recording, and they were very much against it because they'd never heard of me. Neither had anybody else, really. And they were like, no, we need a name. And he's like, no, it must be her. And he pretty much threw all of his toys out of the pram to get his way. Fantastic. And so he fought for me. And honestly, that all worked out. And I came over, and I think the first thing I sang was I Get a Kick Out of You. Went in, did a take with the whole LSO sitting there. And then came in, and I think they were like, okay, let's figure out what else we can do with you. So it took them no time to get on board, but I had to prove it. Yeah. I had to prove that I, belonged there.
And of course, John Wilson spotted you very quickly because he's got a good ear for voices and talent. Good nose for it.
I can't even remember how we... Oh, well, I do remember how we were put together. It was very much... I don't know if Tom Croxon knew my name. I don't know who knew me. I don't know if John... I'd have to ask John. How did you first hear of me? Why did you think that was okay? No, I got a call about doing a concert with him at Buckingham Palace. Okay. With his orchestra. And it was supposed to be me and Denise Van Outen and Gary Williams. And so we were trying to figure out material. And, we got together, and he was like, oh, because he didn't really, he didn't know me. He didn't know my work particularly. So we got around a piano, and he's like, oh, I love the way you sing that. That's great. So he was very much on board once we'd gotten together. We were very much a meeting of minds. Yeah. And we were simpatico from the very beginning. And then, and some of the good songs were going to Denise Van Outen. She was supposed to be doing Get Happy and some of the other stuff. And anyway... She fell out. So I ended up doing all of her stuff too.
Wow.
which was great.
Yeah.
So our first gig was literally at Buckingham Palace.
Gosh.
At it was at one of Prince Charles's charity events.
I wouldn't, had I known you then, I would have, because John and I quite quickly got to know each other. I used to do a radio show called Stage and Screen, and we had him on the show quite early on because he knew quite a lot about film music and was doing some concerts around the country. His orchestra hadn't been founded at that point. But he has got a very, very good nose for style and talent. And I always remember him saying to me when he was doing the Rodgers and Hammerstein prom, he said, "Who am I going to get to do the Shirley Jones songs?" And I said, "You should hear Sierra Bogues." I said, I've just seen her in Love Never Dies, and I think, you should hear her." And he did the same thing, sat around the piano and knew immediately that she was right for that rep.
It's funny that you say that, because he asked me the same question and I said Sierra Bogues.
Did you really?
Yes, I did. We both did that.
That is amazing. Oh, well, no wonder no wonder she was booked on the spot. But that's interesting. Coming back to Kurt Weill for a moment, I mean, there is you do a lot of cabaret work, Kim, and I'd love to see a Kurt Weill cabaret.
Yeah, well...
is that something you would like to do? Because you've done kind of Jerry Herman. I know he's you're another great fan of Jerry Herman's stuff. In my opinion, very underrated in many respects.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't really put together much in the way of cabarets in the last decade, because I've been busy doing essentially the same thing, but with a symphony orchestra. So I do have a plan in my head, and it's something that I've discussed several times with Jim Holmes, who's Jim Holmes.
Yes, I do.
He's conductor at Opera North, and also a viol specialist, and he's on the board of the Viol Foundation.
Well, didn't you do Of Thee I Sing up there?
Oh, yes, I did. Many years ago. Yes,
yeah,
yes, I did. Yeah, and that's probably when I first met him. Although I don't think he ended up conducting the show, but he was very much around and part of the decision process. So yes. Anyway, he and I have talked several times about putting together a Kurt Weill evening, a symphonic one, which I am nudging. See, we now have the same agent. I'm now nudging her to talk to him about, figure out how many players it really needs.
Yeah.
Because we need to come up with ideas that are for a theater-sized orchestra, not a symphony orchestra. And of course, the Kurt Weill music is the perfect size. I mean, any Broadway orchestration, most of them are less than 35 players.
And now more than ever, this is the way forward, isn't it?
Yeah, and honestly, you can't do the modern shows that way because most of them are far too full of synthetic instruments, synthesizers and all that. But anything that's modern poppy is not a symphonic show. But that doesn't mean there aren't any modern ones. There are, but mostly the golden age ones are the ones where you will get things that are laid out for a version of a symphony orchestra, only smaller to fit in a pit.
It was so good seeing you return to the 8 shows a week in Carrie, the Michael Gore, the famous Michael Gore flop, but actually full of good material. And that was such a terrific little revival. I mean, I think we're talking about the way forward. I think that the smaller theatres in London are going to come out of this COVID crisis probably in the short term a lot better.
I'm not sure you're right about that.
Really?
Well, because the smaller theaters,
they don't have as much room to distance the audience, and
they don't have much room. They pay their artists virtually nothing, even when they're at sellout. So how does their budget work when they can't do a sellout crowd, when they only seat 200? The Southwark Playhouse seats 200 people.
Yeah.
So if you can only get 40 people in there, what on earth can you do with that? I think what you can do is take a show that's small and put it on the stage of a big theater, and then you can sell 1,000 of those 3,000 seats, and you can actually make everybody can get paid.
Yeah. Well, hopefully next year we won't be talking in terms of, or later next year we won't be talking in terms of social distancing anymore. We'll be talking in terms of, just making sure that the theatre is well cleaned and sanitized, which in some cases should have been the norm anyway.
Yeah, well,
we've all been to them, but I think it's in some ways you know where the innovation in London has been in recent years, because producers will not take risks in the West End with stuff, and a lot of the new work and a lot of revivers such as Carrie, I mean, could only happen on off West End, on the fringe. In some ways, it's a real shame that, as rumoured, Carrie didn't transfer to a small West End theatre, or indeed another off West End theatre, because it really worked in that staging.
Yeah, there was definitely a movement to move it, and there were people that wanted to move it. We were invited to bring it to the Criterion like 3 months later, but Bill Kenwright, for whatever his reasons were, wouldn't make that deal. He didn't like there was something about it he didn't like, so it didn't happen. And when that didn't happen, I was hugely disappointed, as we all were, because I knew it never would. If it didn't happen then, right away, it was not going to happen. And they've been saying ever since, oh, no, we still might bring Carrie back. I'm like, wait, are you waiting until Carrie has grandchildren? Wait. It's not the same show. To have gotten so lucky with the alchemy of having the right people,
yes,
in that group of people to put it together, it's completely naive to think that you can achieve that alchemy again.
Yeah.
You can make the same production happen, but if you do it with all different people, you're starting from scratch.
Yeah.
And it may not work out the same way you think it will.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I have a big regret about that.
Me
I'm
too.
hugely regretful that didn't move,
Me
because
too.
it didn't need to move. It couldn't move to another small theater. What's the point of that? Nobody's getting paid.
Yeah.
We put in our sweat equity to get the thing on. And now it's time to pay us like grown-ups and put it in a proper theater, because it was sold out. So you've got an audience ready to see it again.
Kim, I've been asking one or two people who've done these podcasts, to identify their favourite rep and their favourite shows, and I want to do the same with you, because the range of what you've done over the years has been enormous. Obviously, a big focus on the American Songbook, but which of the shows that you're inordinately fond of and keep close to your heart?
Well, honestly, I loved doing Annie Get Your Gun, but I'm not going to do that one again, because Granny Get Your Gun, no thank you. I know Ethel did it when she was around my age, but I'm not sure she should have.
Yeah.
she got a lot of flack for it. No, I mean, I think it's more in terms of what is there that I still want to do, as opposed to which ones from the past did I like best. Because everything I did, I liked. I can't think of a single thing that I did that I thought, I'm glad that's over.
You choose well.
Yeah, well, or they chose me, and I liked where I was. I mean, we are pretty much at the mercy of who decides to choose us, but for someone to like you enough to want to choose you means you're already off to a good start. So, for me, the question is more, what do you want to do now?
Yeah.
Well, I want to do Call Me Madam again. I did it at good speed. I've done it in concert. I've recorded a lot of the music, but I want to do a production of that, because that one is, it's an Ethel role, but in a later part of her life, so that she's allowed to be my age.
Yes.
And it's the perfect story of the ugly American comes to Europe and offends everybody and somehow makes right. And it's all got all the political overtones. It's actually the political satire of how the world is now about American politics.
Yes.
Is built into it. It's built into it.
Yeah.
So
I hadn't thought of it that way. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we would like to get a production of that together. And, we have the blessing of the Rodgers and Hammerstein organization, who administers the rights. So
terrific.
I'm not entirely sure that that now is the right time, because I think things are going to have to come back and be smaller. Another thing that I want to do, a good friend of mine from Call Me Madam, Stephen Temperley, wrote a play called Souvenir, which was about Florence Foster Jenkins. And unlike the film, which is pretty much all people know really these days about it, is it's not about, her husband. There's no husband. It's about her and the pianist. And it's about their relationship and just, her, just, she's a kind of a fantastic character. But you actually do have to be able to sing really well to sing badly.
Of course.
In the same way that she sang badly.
Yes, of course.
You have to be able to analyze a note and go, yeah, that's a quarter step sharp. That's a quarter step flat. That one she missed entirely. You have to be able to really do what she did and not just do your own version of I'm singing badly.
Sure.
That's amateur time. And there was another play here which has basically stopped Souvenir from coming over here. Maureen Lipman did a play about her.
It's called Glorious, wasn't it? Yeah.
And it wasn't particularly well received from what I know. I didn't see it, so I have no opinion myself. But I don't think it was a raging success. So people are, they're like, no, we've already seen that story. Well, you haven't seen this play. This play started out off Broadway and went to Broadway and got some Tony nominations. So, this play is a completely different take on that story. Okay. And it's two people, socially distanced.
Yeah. Here's hoping.
Yeah,
My
it's
goodness.
two people. It's the right kind of thing to do now. I want to do Gypsy. Of course I want to give my mom a rose before I'm dead.
Of course. We all want you to do Gypsy.
Yeah, I want to do Gypsy. I want to do Dolly. I want to do everything that Imelda Staunton has had the corner on. I want to do all those roles. I'd like to do Mrs. Lovett. I'd like to do Mrs. Lovett. That would be fun.
Absolutely.
But, and there is there's kind of a prejudice against me here in that, oh no, she couldn't possibly, play an English character. I've been living here since 1992. I mean, 1992. I can do an English accent, which I proved. I did a workshop of a new musical called Tyrell for Paul Taylor Mills, the same guy who put on Carrie. At his new theater down by the Turbine Theater.
Oh, yes.
And I was playing Diana Rigg. It was called Tyrell. It was about the House of Tyrell. So it's the Diana Rigg character from Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones, yeah.
And the two younger ones. It was literally three people. And written by a very up-and-coming, kind of very smart and very talented composer. Just an interesting take. It's a prequel to, them all arriving in Game of Thrones. And it's really only one act long. But I went and I did, I gave my Dame Diana Rigg as what's her name, Tyrell, and did an English accent. And even my own agent was sitting there going, I didn't know you did an English accent. I'm like, well, duh. The first person I ever learned to sing from was Julie Andrews. Yeah. I sang with a British accent till I was about 16 years old.
Yeah. Well, I want to see your Mrs. Lovett, and I want to see your Dolly as well. So, people, listen up. And
there are some roles out there, and honestly, I wish producers would wake up and realize that, signing someone to carry a show like you have to carry those shows, you need someone who knows how to do that with the experience of doing exactly that. Not some television person who wanders over, who had a couple of seasons on Love Island or whatever. Yeah. That's not where you get your talent for these 8 shows a week, or else you're going to have leading people who are out constantly. Yeah. And who lose their voice and never get it back. Because once you're in that cycle of 8 shows a week, if Julie Andrews couldn't get through that cycle without damaging herself, then, what chance does some TV person have who doesn't have the discipline and hasn't been trained properly for it? It's a proper art form, and it needs to be respected as such, and the people who do it need to be respected as such. Yeah.
Well, bless you, and thank you, and as always, a pleasure. And here's to the next 30 years, Kim.
Well, thank you. I really hope I'm not doing this for 30 years. I hope I'm lying in state at the Supreme Court like Ruth Bader Ginsburg in 30 years, with a lot of people around going, oh, we'll miss her. That's what I'd really like.
Okay.